All right. Just been working some stuff out with my husband, trying to figure out some stuff here. But yeah, I just wanted to be real quick with this because there's no real sense in going through everything that I've just written because it speaks for itself. You either will agree or won't agree. It's not going to matter. But that's why the system is doing what it's doing. What do you mean? Well, the movie Idiocracy, the Guiding Reproduction Carefully, the Planned Parenthoods, the birth control, even the fertility shots, regardless of where they come from. Because all therapy, regardless, is a type of fertility shot. It's either giving you life or taking away life. And sometimes that life will take away your life. And it's on how you choose to react to the information, resist it, or embrace it and figure out how you're going to survive the information thrown at you forcibly or through voluntary mechanisms like public health. And so there's really not much to say except everything is financial. Everything is. That's why we have the fractional reserve banking system, which is just like the family. You have the principal at home and then reproduce or try to get a return on investment. And when you're trying to get a return on investment, you better have enough reserves, and that person and whatever must have enough reserves to handle becoming an ROI, which is return on investment for a family or a company and even their community. And when we're breeding so many people who do not develop a return on investment that ends up in longevity, then what you're doing is developing people, places, and things that eat up all resources. And that's what Universe 25 was representing, which is that rat experiment of developing a colony of rats that have no natural predators, no disease really, and watch them keep reproducing each other and living in pleasure and paradise until they become deadly to each other, fighting for resources. And so that's what happens when you have a large family, you fight amongst each other, developing resources, and you have the woman who is so in protect mode, mama bear mode, to protect her investment to the point of even destruction to herself and the community. And then you have predators that are crawling all over society, looking for whatever to satisfy the need, the hunger, whatever you want to call it. And so that's politics, religion, science is basically developing the justification for, family, but also death and destruction. And so, there's really nothing that I can do except to point out what mothers do and what women do to each other, to themselves, to their children. And some mothers don't want to see the error of their ways, and so they become extremely predatory. And again, it was always the women that I had to deal with back either in my childhood or even when I was growing up. It wasn't the men. It was the men who followed the women who are deadly. It's the mothers, it's the wives, it's the girlfriends, it's the cliques that are deadly to each other. And so it'll take a woman in our society to redirect, and it'll take a woman in our society to destroy. And so now you get the choice. And if you don't like how someone characterizes women's choices, then you'll be regulated by a system that you won't agree with. And that's what we're seeing right now, is so much resistance to the system that's regulating women and men who don't want to see the error of their ways, who don't want to look at their own intolerances, who don't want to understand why we have to guide reproduction carefully and be very careful of overextending ourselves. When you grow too fast, you overextend. When you don't grow fast enough, the environment will destroy you. That's called entropy. I mean, when you grow families, big families so fast, they cost money, they cost resources, they cost pain and suffering. They are pain and suffering. And you can't stop the bleeding when people keep reproducing pain and suffering. And so the system has to go and change the overall environment to stop the bleeding. Because you look at the religious world, they're all about having 1 billion children. Then you have, the LGBTQ and even the hetero not having children. They're developing, different diseases because when you get together in a highly influential environment, you're mixing microbes and then you're also remedying them away with remedies and surgeries and all that stuff, that's still pain and suffering. Even though you're not producing children, it's still pain and suffering. But then surround yourself with animals, breeding animals. And so everyone has a responsibility of what's going on. Everyone, the LGBTQ, the family, until somebody learns how to pull back and restrain themselves and not be so greedy. And that's another hard pill to swallow, is when men and women are so capable, they can't stop producing and reproducing because it's wealth. And when someone gets a taste of success and wealth, they can't stop until everything is completely consumed around them, even their friends and family. And so it'll take a woman to finally step away from society and point out the wrongs of society and even her own shortcomings, and I have been, and say, I'm not part of it anymore. I'm done. I'm done consuming everything and everybody, and I'm done buying everything under the sun. I'm done being under the influence. I'm done trying to feed off of animals and children and hormones and feed off of pleasure and paradise and cheap Chinese goods and baubles and trinkets that end up in the basement or end up in the attic or end up on, Instagram or OnlyFans or end up, on eBay and Amazon. So, the society is a mess, and there's no way you can instill this information to someone who is dead set on becoming wealthy with social capital and children and family and friends. And so, when people cannot restrain themselves, when they cannot pull back and conserve their energy, then the system will give them everything they could possibly want. They'll give them the energy. They'll give them potentially even access to money and wealth and power and prestige, and then they will spend themselves out of existence. And that's exactly what's going on. So we're seeing the back and forth of when you had Trump in office and, low interest rates and cheap gas and cheap groceries, and now you're seeing when Biden in office, like, the good mother and the bad, or the good parent and the bad parent, right? The good parent is the one that lets you get away with everything, that gives you whatever you want almost, and the bad parent comes in like, no, you can't do that. The whole good cop, bad cop. That's what the Democrat, Republican, the left and the right, it's like good cop, bad cop. You play against each other, and then you have to realize that's what's going on. And understand that the bad cop is the actual good parent. The bad cop, the one that holds you accountable, the one that puts a restraint on your consumption and out of control parents, is the one that actually has your best interest at heart. It's the ones that don't put a restraint on their children and don't put a restraint on their spending and don't know how to pull back are the ones who are the enemies of society, and they develop monsters. They develop men and women who are predatory and who forcibly insert themselves into everything and try to force convert people and become the thing that they were against. And that's why it is the women that I had to deal with the most in the J world. And in my childhood and even in my adulthood, it was the women that I had to really battle. It's the women who are very predatory. It's the women. And then they instruct the men around them. And then the men turn into Norman Bates. Okay? And so it'll be up to the women to make or break their family and their friends and society. And if you're not strong enough, then you'll join in with all the pleasure and paradise and the destruction, and the system will regulate, and then at your own hand, you'll take away not only your pain and suffering, but your life. And also instruct your children how to take away their lives. And that's kind of what's going on. So, yeah, that's the long and short of it. Yeah, I mean, I pretty much spelled it out the last couple days. I articulately I put it all together. Women, the queen bees, the king bees, the mothers, women are wholly responsible for the downfall of our society, because they've bred so much pain and suffering in the population. The system can't hold any more of that. It'll be the women who will either save themselves. They can't save their kids. It's done. When you've already brought a child or an animal in the world that is in so much deficit, you can't force them to to live if they can't handle the pain and suffering. You can't force feed them. And so you have no control over your kids now. Now it's up to them to figure it out or not. And so when you're reproducing bodies in aggressive deficit, yeah, they're tired. They're so fucking tired. Women are tired. Children are tired. Men are tired. But Generation X, we were exposed to the Gordon Geckos, the greed is good, Wall Street, make a quick buck, sit in these paradigms and never ever change or evolve or even bring in information, new information to you. So, yeah, so we're going to be reaping what we sow. And again, when you develop children who are in such deficit, who are constantly making trips to the hospital all the time, getting things systematically carved out of their body, under the influence, addictions and everything else, it's done. When kids are that much deficit and they're basically tied to the medical holistic system, it's done. There's nothing you can do. So only the mothers can save themselves, if they even have the substance to, because most likely they've given all their resources to their children. They're going to die for their children, their husbands, their wives, whatever. So yeah, that's why the 1950s and 60s, well, 1950s and 40s and 30s, you had the robust men, that some were gay and some weren't. And then as you keep reproducing kids, you're seeing then each generation becomes weaker and weaker and weaker and more predatory. And then eventually it will be infertility. And so if you already done the experiments with the rat colony, the system has to change the environment to develop more fertility. So you see that so much fertility. Eventually, when you speed it up, you'll see what happens if you don't find a way to develop a controlled decline so you can save the human race. And so even though the government is saving the human race on a global level, each mother will be responsible for herself. And if she decides not to have kids, fuck yeah. Idiocracy was actually a documentary. It is what is going on right now. Idiocracy is exactly what's going on right now. And you could say that's a mean thing, but not necessarily. Why are you having kids? And maybe one of these days, those arguments won't hold any more water. Why do you have animals? When you're that deficient, you're lonely. Why do you have all your friends and family? When you're that deficient and you're lonely, and yeah, and you're greedy. So deficiency, loneliness, greediness develops a Babylonian society. And so those are like, oh gosh, we're in Babylon. Yeah, if you're a mother, you are part of Babylon. You hold every responsibility out there. And some mothers will be like, oh, I've taken responsibility. I know I fucked up and here, this is the best I can do. And I'll do the best I can, but I know I can't control. And I get that. There's some mothers in the J world that understand their responsibility and they know they can't control their kids and they do the best they can do it to be a representation, but there's no guarantee. But they understand their responsibility in it. And just by being affiliated, I'm not asking you to be like, well, I'm so sorry I brought these kids into the world. No. But if you even see my information as credible, then you are acknowledging some part of responsibility, and myself included. Well, because I don't have any kids, but I support a system of remedies and surgeries, and even thought of, well, getting married is like then putting women through a battle. So yeah, I'm part of it all, but I'm now controlling the suffering and making it less and less so it doesn't tax the system. And then, yeah, I don't need health insurance. I don't need the addictions of smoking and doing drugs and all the things that people do when they are in deficit. I don't have my own car. My husband drives his car and he pays for the insurance and all that. And he works and I do the best I can to fit in without taxing him, without taxing our society, without being a blight on this earth. And I live within my means. And I realize that, yeah, I don't want to be one of those women that enslave her husband. And I don't want to be one of those women that have addictions, that need animals and need children to keep her company. Relative self-sufficiency means that if something happened to someone in your world, you could still survive without them without having to replace them with something else. That you could stand on your own 2 feet one day when all the conditions are right, whatever that is. And so right now, women who don't have kids or animals and who've done through the J world, you are in the prime position to start figuring out how you would survive on your own, because one day that will happen. One day that will happen where there's no one around you that's going to support you in company and whatever else. That you might be the only one left in your world if you're in the J world and understand where I'm coming from. Other people will die with their friends and family and die for their friends and family. But there's also another option. You're not bringing in suffering, you're not taking away suffering, and you're responsible for yourself. And you're also transitioning from a disposable society to a sustainable society. And that will be the hardest of all when you're straddling 2 worlds. All right, bye.